Hello and welcome to On Landscape. I'm here with our usual co-host, Joe Cornish, and myself, Tim Parkin, with our special guest, Simon Baxter. Hello, Simon. How are you?
Hello, Tim. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Great. All good here. Technology is behaving, which is always a good one.
Yep.
And I should tell people we are on the 5th of November at the moment, so it might well be some fireworks going off occasionally, but I'm sure we'll cope with that. We'll test the noise reduction capabilities of
I'm
of
afraid
our
our
system.
little dog is definitely showing signs of distress already, so I'm a bit
Oh,
worried
no.
about
Yes. Well, Meg was hiding under my desk, but she's now gone into the book storage room with a speaker playing spa music.
Oh, that's a good idea. I like that. We have in our village. I think we've basically banned fireworks from anybody who lives here
Oh,
for
right, okay.
because of dogs, and we got an old people's home in the village as well, so it keeps people.
Right, that's good.
Well, dogs seems like a good place to start with on an interview with Simon, I feel, Tim. So take it away.
Yeah, well, I'm interested first of all how your exhibition. You recently had a joint exhibition about woodland. Can you tell us a little bit about the theme of it? And I'll give that to you, Simon, first.
Yes, so we had, Joe and I had an exhibition together 3 years ago called Woodland Sanctuary at Danby, which we felt was a great success. Hopefully, Joe's, yes, he's nodding, good. um, So off the back of that, somebody at Nunnington Hall National Trust contacted us and asked if we would do Woodland Sanctuary there. We jumped at the chance, and I think that was the original idea, that we would more or less take images that were left or prints that were left from Woodland Sanctuary and use them and add to them. But very quickly, I think we decided that what would be quite nice would just be to start a completely new curation, because a lot changes in 3 years.
Yep.
And also the themes that we had at Woodland Sanctuary were great and they worked for that space. But Nunnington Hall is a very different space. It was split into 4 rooms. So 9 themes across 4 rooms didn't really work. So we
Yeah.
simplified it, which gave us a bit more flexibility. And I think it's stronger as a result of that, I think. So the general themes are emergence, interference, transience, and performance. And this new exhibition is called All the Woods a Stage. All the Woods a Stage was a theme in the first exhibition. Happened to be my favourite theme because it plays a lot with the ideas of performers, anthropomorphizing trees, seeing characters, and just letting your imagination go. So it's been really fun to play with that a little bit more as well. So yeah, it's great. It is great. It has been great. It continues to be
How long's it
very
on for then?
enjoyable until the end of March. So
that's good.
yeah, I miss it at the minute because it's closed for Nunnington Hall's closed for about 2.5 weeks. So it reopens again on the 21st of November, by which point it'll be decorated for Christmas. Runs until the 14th of December, and then it's closed for 2 months, unfortunately. But then reopens again mid-February, and then we've got 6 weeks until the end of March.
And I believe, have you done a book with it as well?
Yes. I'm organised. I've got one to hand.
Hey, excellent.
Yes, the All Woods a Stage book, which has Joe might have mentioned, Alex might have mentioned that I've had a lot of problems with printing, but actually this book was a breeze, and
Excellent.
we're extremely pleased with it. So
there's no.
we think it's stronger than the Woodland Sanctuary one. Sorry, say again.
There's no easy ride when it comes to printing.
No, that one was an easy ride, I would say. It didn't take us long to produce. And the printing, I only had to be there for half a day. It was just going so smoothly, so which never happens for me.
I'll be down there on the 23rd, spending 3 days. So hopefully that'll go just as smoothly. That's for natural.
Fingers crossed.
So,
and sorry, Tim, just for anybody who's listening, but where that is in Cheshire, in Nantwich. So I mean, it feels a bit like a commercial for Johnson's printers, but I mean, they are the guys who do offset printing for all of us and for many of our friends and associates, and who found them extremely good.
They are very good, and also because the owner's very interested in landscape photography, he's quite willing to put the extra effort, I think. So
Yeah, and it does go above and beyond to just make you happy,
Yeah.
which isn't always easy with us photographers.
You pick it up.
But he perseveres until he gets a smile from you, which is good.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Excellent. And Joe, how did you go about choosing the pictures for it?
Well, that was a really interesting one. We started. Well, I suppose we had experience from previously that we like to work with print first and foremost. So Simon and I both we kind of did our shortlist, created Photoshop contact sheets, and chopped them up. And then, it was like playing cards on a table. So we had a kind of short list of around, what was it, 100, 120, something like that, knowing that we would need to bring it down to about half that number.
Yeah.
And it was good fun, actually. You might think it would be highly contentious, but it really wasn't. And I think it's actually really good. You've got somebody else to say, well, I think that or this. And so long as you respect the other's opinion and there's a lot of flexibility, then you end up with I think a result that's probably stronger than if you did it yourself with all of the risk of having your own too much personal input. I think that sort of editorial element is really good.
I think we're a bit more assertive this time. I think previously I think I picked Joe's images and he picked mine, which sounds very dangerous, but it worked very well. Whereas this time, I think we're a little bit more relaxed. And if there's something that we felt strongly about including, then we went ahead and did that, so long as it didn't sort of stand out too much.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, is that like creating a book where you're choosing images that may not be the best images, but they are the images that work well as a group?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that's essentially it. Is that it has to work as a whole, and certainly with the book, the sequences become more important as well, and particularly when we're trying to mix our images together, our prints together on a wall. It's not just a case of here's my work and here's Joe's. Everything's mixed up. There are kind of instances within the exhibition where there's a group of Joe's work and there's a group of mine, just because there's different ideas that Joe's got and different ideas that I have, which don't work together. But there's plenty of mixing and matching within the exhibition as well.
There is, and actually that side of it, I think was really dynamic. And I think the other thing that's worth saying is that in order for this show to work, and you pointed out, Tim, that if you in a book you don't always have just all the strongest pictures; they have to make sense editorially. And Simon's woodland collection is absolutely enormous, and the archive is phenomenal. You could never get all good pictures in. It would. They're all good, but if you just went on that value alone, that wouldn't work. You need the concepts that make the whole thing a kind of complete experience, and so that's what we've done. And essentially, there are certain areas where I think if you take the themes, the second, we're pretty balanced actually throughout the two of us, but. In the second theme, which is called interference, which is more to do with the industrialization of woodland, harvesting, and the sort of somewhat conflicted relationship human beings have with forest, with trees. I had a few more of those kind of pictures, so there's a few more of mine in there, whereas in the next section in particular, in transience, Simon's got a very, very strong collection in there, and there's a majority of the prints in there are his. So you get that kind of shift, but overall, we're more or less the same number of pictures each.
Yeah. There was a couple of images which I was absolutely certain were going to be part of the exhibition, but then when we started to curate it, they were just very obvious outliers as well. So as much as it hurts, they just have to be put aside and perhaps used in the future.
It's often quite nice to see some images that you might never use in an exhibition because you've got a personal relationship with them, or they display something but maybe are a little bit flawed for public consumption, but they work in a gallery context, in an exhibition context, because they connected by themes or in a book. Quite like that.
Yeah.
to see.
Yeah, exactly. There's lots of images, I think, in the exhibition that I wouldn't necessarily think of publishing on social media as a standalone image, because I just don't think there would be that much interest. But display it along with other images as part of a particular intention, and they start to make sense.
Exactly, and actually, I mean, Tim, you use the phrase flawed, but it could be, and Simon just referred to the fact he wouldn't use social media, but clearly, there are pictures that you make which often are sometimes they're made not under duress, but with uncertainty, maybe with a feeling of shock, and it's a different kind of emotion that many of my pictures have got stuff going on in them that. Might be a surprise, or they're certainly not perfect pictures, but if they tell the story and they form part of that that sort of compelling narrative that you're looking to create, then yes, it's obviously a good opportunity to use pictures like that. And as you say, in an exhibition, you might not use them elsewhere, but here they work.
But also, you can't predict how people are going to respond. You have images which you feel very confident about that the audience are going to enjoy, and I think we've definitely been right on some of those. But there's others where we think never in a million years anybody's going to buy a print of this, but they do, because you can't predict how people are going to connect with different pieces of work.
You got an example of that one?
I do.
Well, I don't say, because it's one of Joe's, and I didn't want to sound offensive by saying no way somebody's going to buy this.
So go on.
Yeah, but that was yours in interference, wasn't it, Joe?
That's right. Yes, I mean the interference section. I was very confident that none of the pictures would probably sell, or at least if the ones that did would be the ones that are more. There were a few in there. There are plantations that are transformed by snow, for example, or nice lighting conditions. But many of the kind of hardcore industrial images would appear very unattractive. But one of them has sold.
To a forester.
To a forester. So, and in a way, I think it's an interesting question, because it makes you realize that while my emotion looking at that scene, the one in particular, is actually in Glen Etive and close to you, Tim, and I think you've probably seen the picture. But anyway, it was made with a great deal of care and consideration and thoughtfulness in terms of where I placed the tripod and the camera, and everything was done in the way that I would normally would. But my heart wasn't singing when I made that picture. I mean, it really was, oh my goodness, this is really quite hard to take.
It's at the very end of Glen Etive.
It's actually really right, I would say, in the middle segment there. And I mean, the deforestation in the Glen has been extensive now. And it's part of the nature of harvesting woodland. But that picture was made in a kind of style, in a way that was more reminiscent of the the well-known environmental photographers whose work is shown in large galleries in major cities around the world. And I think that I guess the point is that we are there to document the world. So these are as well as being interpretations, they're also a document. So they, in a documentary sense, they may mean something completely different to somebody who works in industrial forestry. So, I found that in itself was a real eye opener, and I'm really grateful. I'm grateful that he's bought the print, but I actually learned a lot. I think from realizing that somebody could love that picture, love it enough to want to have it on their wall.
I think there's something to be said for that, because people very often are looking for the best picture or the very best subject. And oftentimes it's the best subject is the most important bit, because they think the subject is going to sell the picture in terms of likes or sales or whatever. But I think there's a lot to be said for making the very best picture of subjects that may not be particularly attractive, because you want a relationship with it, because it's important to you.
Yeah, the most important thing of all is sorry, Simon, is to make pictures with every fiber of your being every time you do it. I think that's all that matters. I really do. And then something else is communicated in the process, but you have to commit to the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And the, even in that moment, you're going to have mixed emotions, perhaps it's, because of the impact of humans on the landscape, and you're seeing something that you find quite distressing. It doesn't mean it can't be represented in a beautiful way or an intriguing way or in some way that evokes a positive emotion in someone. But so long as they feel something, I think that's a lot of what we try to achieve in the exhibitions as well, is that when people look at the work, we want them to feel something, not just look at it and think, oh, that's nice.
That's nice.
But actually go away perhaps even thinking a little bit differently about trees as well.
And you mentioned that one of the pictures is from Glen Etive, so there's a geographic spread of the images. I presume they're all UK, or are a lot of them from the area or from a particular area? Obviously, yours will be mostly, Simon, because you work quite locally.
Yes. Yeah. In my case, it's either local. I would say majority of my images in the exhibition are probably local within the North York Moors. And beyond that, I think only Scotland. Whereas Joe's are a bit more widespread, I think. And that was another reason, actually, to not repeat the Woodland Sanctuary exhibition, which was confined to the North York Moors and probably only 50% of the North York Moors. This time we wanted to include work from further afield because we felt it was important to do that, and it makes it a little bit more diverse and interesting as well.
It did, yeah, and that's because although the woodland in the moors is pretty varied, but it definitely extends the range significantly when you can include the south of England and Scotland as well, which we have done. So, and I think it's still cohesive in spite of that, because after all, it's still UK woodland, and it's creatively, it gave us a lot more scope. That was really the nice aspect of having the whole country available for it.
Yeah,
I'm intrigued from your point of view, Joe, because you probably travel more. I don't know how far and wide you've travelled, Simon, outside of the UK.
For photography, in terms of woodland photography, I haven't.
Yeah.
I haven't. No. I mean, I did go on a one-off trip to Antarctica and took an inflatable palm tree. No, I didn't, but that was a good idea.
How many trees?
Yeah. The amount, I would be quite rich if I got £1 for every time somebody said to me on the ship, "Have you spotted any trees yet, Simon?" But yes, for actual woodland photography, I don't think I've done anything outside of the UK.
The reason I'm asking is I'm wondering what's special about UK woodland, because I think there is. I think there's something to be said for it as a difference to a lot of other countries.
We did write about that in the book, actually, and I think that. So I'll jump in there, but I feel really strongly that one of the great things about the UK landscape is our woodland, in spite of the fact that almost all of it actually has been mucked about with at various times in the historic past. There's very, very, very few fragments of really true wildwood, but there is a lot of wildwood, in the sense there's a lot of woodland that's not managed, or it's only very lightly managed. And what's really amazing, having been so Tim, you were asking about Simon's range of experience of woodland. I've been lucky enough to have photographed trees elsewhere in the world, particularly New Zealand, Australia, and the US. And one of the really notable differences between those countries and ours is that it's generally, in my experience, it's been much more monocultural in other countries. So particularly Australia, where eucalyptus is so dominant, and there's some amazing trees, and it's some brilliant woodland there. And there is some true wilderness that's still in Tasmania, for example. But what you don't get is the extraordinary range of different trees that we get. So, even in our local woods, you could easily find 20 different species. growing side by side, or throughout across the hill. I mean, obviously, some trees thrive more in different spots, and the ones that are common. We know all of them, very very well. You will always find alder and willow by water, and then of course there's loads of oak, and we see beech and birch and hazel and holly and ash and lime and so on and so forth. And there's many more, but they're very widespread, and they just coexist in the most amazing, apparently chaotic but not actually so chaotic order, as you move across the landscape. And yeah, it's an absolute pleasure and wonder of the woods in the UK, I think.
Yeah. Well, like Joe said, it's the sheer variety, and so I've got this. Sorry, shameless plug. My zine, Oak, which is, it's a booklet of photographs of only oak trees and only oak trees in the North York Moors, and again only ones which have never been in a previous publication. So it's,
Niche.
but even with those restrictions, there's so much variety, locally, just tucked away in sometimes very, very small woodlands, but those small woodlands offer a wealth of opportunity. And even though they might not be truly wild, they have that feeling of wildness. And you only have to step into what can be a very small woodland in a quiet valley, which will only be a very, very short drive away from civilization, but you also feel very disconnected from civilization. And it's that level of immersion that you can feel in the most, what might appear from the outside, quite a nondescript location. But you can still step into there and find endless compositions. And all that's on our doorstep. But then when you move further afield, there's so much variety again. You move over to the west coast, where we've got Atlantic rainforests, and which are lichen rich, and lichens which don't appear anywhere else in the world. So we do have a lot of very special fragments of woodland. It's just a shame that there's such a tiny percentage of what they once were, but they're special. And I think there's a building awareness of how special they are, and more of a desire to protect and expand these very unique environments.
I think when you've got a country that's only got 13%, well, England has only got 13% woodland. I think last time I looked at the figures for it.
Yes, but that is a big increase on what it used to be. After the First World War, it was down to, I think, 5.5% of the country, after so many trees were cut down for pit props, for mining, for coal mining in particular. And historically, our country's exploited trees for every imaginable, conceivable purpose, but especially ships in the medieval period, where we lost a huge amount of woodland cover then, even though there was replanting at that time. There was a sort of succession plans for oak, because oak was the best timber for warships. But I mean, there's immense history associated with trees as well, which is part of the pleasure of working with trees, and the many different kinds. I mean, Simon's got this wonderful little book on oak trees. I'm sure there must be a few other trees lurking in the background of some of those pictures, by the way. But yeah, an oak are absolutely the iconic species in a way, aren't they? But there are many, many others, and think especially in the south of England, the beech is quite a dominant species of tree, and they are magnificent trees. But there's so many others as well that you can find. And having just come back from another trip in your part of the world, Tim, I'm very closely associated with birch at the moment. So I'm very old, and some very old ones, and they're all covered in old man's beard. It's just the most wonderful sight at this time of year, particularly when it's raining.
Yeah, I think the Atlantic rainforest, I think they're only about 1% of their original size, I think.
Yeah.
But there's vast areas which have the capability to have that kind of environment, I think.
That's true. And I mean, sorry, Tim, just one more point there is that I think that, we don't know what the future holds, but there is a definite movement and energy and enthusiasm for planting trees now, which is supported by various governments. not just in the UK. And these, of course, we won't see the great benefit or the main benefit of these new plantations of native species, because that requires hundreds of years. And we can only hope that generations in future do realize the importance of this asset. I mean, it's almost impossible really to imagine life on Earth without trees, and the role, the amount of good stuff that they do for us is, well, it would take the next half an hour just to describe
Well,
it.
I think that's essentially it, though, isn't it? If we don't have trees, there won't be humans on Earth.
Yeah. Well, it is reassuring that there's at least a couple of recent cases where a tree has been chopped down, or multiple trees chopped down, and the result has been front page news and uproar across the whole country. So
Yes.
it's reassuring that people do value trees like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it is becoming more important. I think tree preservation orders are taking place.
Yes.
But I think what part of the variety for the UK is we've got this huge variety of weathers, 5 different weather systems hitting the UK. Then we've got geological changes all the way up from sedimentary old seas to mountain ranges and volcanoes in the past, up in Scotland and over in the Lake Districts. And they create an environment on which so many different types of trees can.
That's true. Trees flourish in different types of geology, different types of soil, different types of slope aspect, and humidity and so on. And they're a great reflection of the weather in that area, the climate, and so many other things. And it's wonderful to see them thriving in a natural environment, and it tells us a lot about that environment.
I'll move on to some of the questions because I'm interested in one of our readers, Matt Lancaster, has asked about how your photographic approach to the woodlands has changed since you find out more about what the woodlands are, etc. So when you started out, you may not have known as much as you do now about the woodlands. I'll give that to Simon. Do you think you've changed an approach over a decade or so of learning about woodland and also photographing them?
Yes. It's very difficult to pinpoint, though. That's the thing, because the changes are so subtle. But I've often said about how it's important that if you're going to photograph something such as trees, then it really helps to know something about them. And I think that's part of the process of caring for your subject matter, is that, the prerequisite of caring, I think, is to actually learn about it.
I remember watching a video by a photographer giving some tuition when he was talking about his composition and talking about these little yellow jobbies in the foreground and those
little yellow jobbies, right? Okay.
Really should know more about taking photographs of than that.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the connection process, I think, and having empathy in your approach. So I think if anything else, rather than making conscious compositional choices based on your knowledge of trees, rather than that, I think it's more that there's more of a deep connection with the things that you're photographing, and that sort of sheer love and empathy for it, which develops over time, and I think should become stronger and stronger. I think lots of things are happening unconsciously in the process of making a composition as well, which stems from all those things that have been kind of building up and become intuitive as you gain more experience as a photographer. But that being said, I think there is sometimes some conscious decisions. And if anything else, I think understanding something, having a real reverence for things like oak trees, when you're presented with an ancient oak tree, it's not just a case of, here's a fantastic looking subject, I'm going to take a photograph of that. It becomes more of a process of sheer awe and wonder. And with that comes a much more considerate process of observation, time spent with the tree. And that process of observation, time, and exploring it from different angles, being curious and intrigued by it, I think that then results in a better interpretation of that tree. And it becomes that, for me, it's always a celebration of trees, but also a feeling that I need to do justice to them, because they've done so much for me on a very personal level that it is a quest to do justice. So I think that just encourages us to spend time, and then good things come from that more considered and slow approach to photography.
I think you're right that when you learn more about something, it does make you more curious, and curiosity feeds into the approach to subject that you have when you're out photographing. Inevitably.
Absolutely, it's a powerful thing, and that's why actually probably my favorite part of woodland photography is exploration, because you've got this constant sense of anticipation, curiosity, kind of, it's almost overwhelmed. The senses are overwhelmed by sight, sound, and smell, and that leaves no room for anything else in your mind other than, enjoying the woods and then trying to translate into a good photograph. So yeah, that it takes your mind into good places, and I think that's the foundation of trying to make images that have your kind of personal stamp on it, but also perhaps soul,
it feeds into
you can't
it does feel
define.
into a style, soul, and everything.
Yeah.
Becomes who you are is what you photograph in a way, and the other way around as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
One thing that I'd like to say is that the thing that seems most obviously characteristic in landscape photography terms about woodland, and one of the reasons that I used to find it a very, very difficult subject in years gone by, especially when I was shooting transparency film, is that it's extremely complex visually. And I think that's one of the secrets of woodland. What makes it so therapeutic is because it's so complex, and because there are threats with moving through trees, being banged in the head and tripping over branches and so on and so forth. But there's also so much wonder, and the threats keep you alert, and the complexity constantly preoccupies every part of your brain. And so if you have an inner voice that's kind of nagging you with something, or struggling with your mental health, for example, going out for a walk in the woods is really literally, I think, one of the best ways of getting out of that state, because you have to concentrate on what you're doing, and there's so much rich variety to enjoy as you move through the woodland. Or you might just stay in one place and you can still have so much to see. So that complexity is a big part of its appeal. And one of the things that I personally feel, you asked Simon about how his work might have changed, and certainly I think in my case that apart from the fact that I now love that complexity in a way where I might have been trying to simplify before, trying to embrace that complexity is the ultimate kind of creative challenge. And then one more thought is that fundamentally trees, are a community. They're like a bit like humans in a way. We're herd animals to a large extent, and trees are too, and they benefit from being together around each other. And as we now know from a lot of contemporary scientific study, and so relationship seems a really kind of underlying theme, which helps me to make compositional decisions when I'm in the wood, because relationship is a core aspect of what drives my own sort of attempt to interpret what I'm looking at, if that makes sense.
And I think one of the very important things when approaching woodland photography is your general mindset, attitude, and expectations. And I think a lot of people enter the woods perhaps with an expectation formed from images that they've seen online. Perhaps they end up feeling frustration because of the complexity of it. And I think it's important to, well, I found it easier not to view it as chaos, because a lot of people talk about chaos in woodland and trying to tame the chaos. But like Joe said, I think if you embrace the complexity and see that as a fulfilling creative challenge, that's a much more positive mindset than, oh my God, this is far too chaotic. What am I going to do with this? I don't see it as chaotic. I don't think nature's chaotic. I think it has its own patterns and means of dealing with the environment. And that is probably, as Joe said, I think that's probably one of the changes that I've seen in mine as well, is more complexity, because that is what woodland and nature is. So if I'm going to kind of speak for the trees and make images which represent the trees, but also their unique woodland and their surrounding neighbours and all the different facets that make that particular woodland interesting, then there's a lot to consider, notice, embrace, and include in your photographs, I think. So we shouldn't shy away from that. We should make photographs which express exactly what nature and woodland is, rather than just taking isolated trees, which make very nice portraits, but they're a little bit easier to compose than some of these more complex scenes.
Interesting you should say that, because in our competition, we have a lot of tree portraits, individual trees, very nice trees. They rarely do very well unless there's something incredible about the light, or usually anything that keeps the interest in our judges are relationships between trees or place of light or whatever. But that feeds into one of the questions from Kai Thompson, and he was asking about how you link photography to self-awareness, mindfulness, and personal growth. Where I know we just mentioned that about the idea that being in the woodland is a therapeutic exercise, mainly because it engages the whole brain. And I can understand that, having about an active brain. You can't think about much else when you've got the camera ready and looking for the way the parallax shifts branches and leaves, and you're looking at subjects and thinking about how the light might change. So what do you think about the idea of mindfulness? It is talked about a lot in landscape photography now.
Well, if I wasn't seeking a means to manage my own, or deal with my own feelings of despair and pain, if I was never put into that situation, then I wouldn't be a photographer now. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So I have very strong emotions towards photography being a therapeutic pursuit, because that's the primary reason why I go into the woods in the first instance, is because I have to. I have to, from a personal and physical point of view, and my body and mind tells me when I need to go to the woods. And if 2 weeks have passed and I've not been out with my camera, then boy do I feel it. So I have to be out there, which is quite interesting, because I think that does help in photographic terms, because again, it's about mindset. Because if I'm going into the woods, then really my attitude is a photograph is just a bonus. So long as I go out and I come back feeling better, then that's a result. So it is very much an experience first approach, photography second. And again, that helps just because it puts you in a frame of mind which perhaps just leaves you more open and more perceptive. Because people often ask, how do you see these scenes in a woodland? And so, well, perhaps just don't look too hard. Just enjoy the experience. Be immersed and be taken by the woods. Rather than going with the attitude, I'm going to take pictures, just be taken by that environment and enjoy it for what it is. And in that process, I think that very relaxed, restorative process, I think you're more likely to be seeing things at the same time.
That reminds me of a story about a friend of mine who was struggling to see anything in a location. I don't think it was necessarily woodland, but a colleague said, why don't you just sit down and close your eyes for a minute and then reopen them? Yeah. And he said the transformation was incredible. Exactly the same scene as he was looking at a few seconds ago, but just that act of shutting everything off and then looking with fresh eyes changed.
Well, I went into the woods yesterday. It was almost dark by the time I left. I wasn't there for very long. But I did. My camera gear was in the car, but I just left it behind. because I knew that the most important thing that I needed that day was just to be in the woods, not to make photographs. So yeah, I went for the walk. Always enjoy it just as much, whether I've got my camera with me or not. And I just think if you love a place as much as that, then that's the place that you should be making photographs. But just don't feel as if you always have to. Just sometimes just go and enjoy it for what it is.
Got a question from the winner of the Natural Landscape Photographer of the Year, a lady called Joy Kachina from Tasmania.
Oh, yeah. Anna Joy.
And she was asking, what elements are you looking for to create an artistic expression in your woodland photographs? And I'll ask this, Joe, as well, because it's interesting. How do you think about the trees? I know some people have an approach of thinking them as people and communities and relations, etc. Is that an approach, one of your approaches?
Do you want to go, Joe, seeing as I've just been...
Yeah, I'll give you a break, Simon. Yes. Yeah, gosh. I think that for me, and I was actually came back south from Scotland today and had to stop and walk in the woods on the way because I wanted to get some exercise. And yes, I had my camera with me because it gave me an excuse to walk in the woods. But the trees are, I mean, what I couldn't answer Joy's question directly, but what I do think is that everything is new as you walk through the woods. Every time is new, and even though there will be elements of patterns of some familiar trees, if you keep going back to the same woodland as I do many times, but it's never exactly the same. And in that way, I think you realize that they have very active lives. Many of them have been subject to Storm Amy and similar massive storms that we've had in recent years. So there's a lot of trees that have limbs broken, or they've been blown over, uprooted completely in some cases, and now they're returning to the soil from where they came, with lots of little saplings appearing. So I suppose my feeling about the woods is that it's a constantly dynamic, changing environment, which is also then subject to the weather and the light. So you really can't formulate what photographic response you might make until you're in it. And then it's dependent on those conditions. And like Simon, I agree. It's really important not to force it or to feel that you have to photograph. I think just wandering about is the kind of mindset that I like to be in. And I think these ideas or concepts such as relationship, for example, or other emotional characteristics that we recognize in trees are ones that occur spontaneously from being there. There was one thing that happened to me today, I recall, when I walked down into an area of very, very tall pine trees, probably 150, 200 years old, which had growing among them birches that were a great deal younger and still had very brilliant, bright, colourful leaves. And it was such an obvious picture possibility that here was a concept. It was a peaceful coexistence between these very young, beautiful, very colourful trees and these much older, much taller, much larger trees. So we have a human interpretation which we can apply in all sorts of contexts. As it happens, I didn't take a picture of that concept because I couldn't find anything that really kind of where everything came together. But I was just happy to have had the chance to think about it and realize that, there are some things that aren't necessarily going to work just because you want them to. Ultimately, it's a visual art form. It has to work visually for me. I won't just photograph something because it's an idea. It has to be more than that. But there's the wealth of possibilities which may emerge purely through the beauty of the subject, its pure form, texture, and color for its own sake, or because it suggests something to your imagination. All of that is endless, and it's an endless fusion of different possibilities. So I don't think it's a formula, but I'm pretty sure Joy already knows all of that from what you've said about her. So, but hopefully that was interesting anyway.
Yes. Well, exactly what you were saying, Joe, about, and it's one of the things that I love about the woods is that was a big bang. Was that constant change, the change with the seasons, the change with the conditions, the change as each year passes by and as woodland's affected by storms and other things. But also, just when you think that you've exhausted every opportunity from a small woodland, you go in on a different day, the light's different, with a different mindset and a whole new kind of array of opportunities present themselves. And that's what's fascinating. This is why you can never be bored from a particular woodland. Even after 10 years of photographing the same woodland, you can still be fascinated by it. And obviously, over time as well, your eye changes and what appeals changes as well. And you become more receptive to different things. But some of the things that I do actively look for is probably inspired by, so to kind of answer it more directly, well, for example, there's my mycelium t-shirt. so so back in 2016, when I read The Hidden Life of Trees and learning about the Wood Wide Web, that got me thinking about, so if trees are communicating, like Joe said, you think of them more as a community rather than standalone, isolated specimens. But also that I started to imagine this connection underground, above ground. So I kind of flipped it upside down and then started to kind of connect branches together. And, taking some inspiration from words that Joe's used in the past as well when he's talked about flow. So I was like, yeah, branches flow from one to another, and you can build a connection through a broad composition, which allows the eye to kind of meander through it. So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for. Anthropomorphism, yeah, I love that. And inspiration from, modern culture, films such as Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. Those are the types of films that I watch every year. So obviously when I see things in the woods that remind me of these mythical beasts or giant spiders or things like that, then it's more just fun, and again, it's tapping into your own imagination and taking you to that place of childlike wonder, which is a very kind of powerful place to be, I think, because if you're thinking like a child, then the experience is more expansive and you're illuminating more of what's around you because you view it as new and exciting and not looking at things with prejudice, but that every single element that makes up the woodland, whether it's a piece of fern, a frond of bracken, a pillow of moss, some lichens on a tree, all those different elements is just as important as the tree itself. And I think it's that really helps, I think, because then you're not just looking at subjects, but at textures, patterns, shapes, colour. And colour is very much part of the experience for me and part of the emotion of being in the woods, which is why I've never published a black and white image.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. I must say that, and one of the things that strikes me as really interesting is that although Simon's focus is completely on trees and woodland at the moment, I still am more of a general practitioner as a photographer, but I do think that that for me the trees and the woodland environment have become so important to my practice, and practice is the word that I wanted to emphasize, because I actually think that the more time you spend, the more deeper you get into the whole artistic interpretation side of it. And I think it's worth remembering that painters, many of the painters who we look to as kind of exemplary now, and I'm thinking particularly of Paul Cézanne, and who painted Mont Saint Victoire, on which he could see from his house, over and over and over again. He did other things as well. He did still life and some portraits, but or take Edouard Manet, who was renowned for his practice, and Monet, who repeatedly painted his water lilies and the facade of Rouen Cathedral, over and over and over again. And I found myself reading a book called Artwork by Sally Mann the other day, which I think I might have mentioned to you, Tim. And she is a great quote of hers in that, which is, "I keep taking the same damn picture." Well, of course she doesn't. They're all different, but she keeps exploring around themes, which I think is themes that are familiar and that you feel deeply and strongly about. The more that you have a commitment to the subject matter or to the concepts that you're working on, then I think on the whole, the more likely it is that you're going to make interesting photographs.
Mm-hmm.
I've got one last question. You have to excuse the start of it, Simon. This is from Daniel Eek, who says, "Simon, your pictures aren't that special, just a moment in time in the woods. But I keep looking at them. What is the magic? What's so special about your pictures? Why does it inspire me to go out?"
Okay.
I think he's saying they are special, obviously.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess, but you can't. I can't really sort of understand how. It's difficult to put your kind of mind in the place of the viewer and understand how they're interpreting an image. But I guess for me, something that I've often tried to do is to portray the experience, because I do this, even though everything's very much, images are made for myself, first and foremost, but there always becomes a point when making a photograph where after I've made it, I just detach myself for a second and think, okay, objectively, so I've decided what I'm trying to achieve here. I have my intent. I've got, I've found my borders, and I feel as if the composition is good. But objectively, if I was just to look at this end result, does it achieve what I've set out to achieve? Where do I think the viewer's eye is going to travel when they look at this? And if in that process, you then find potential distractions or things that don't quite work, and you might refine it a little bit further. But it is essentially that I want to make images, which this is why a lot of my images, they don't have a false perspective. Typically, they're taken at eye level, and they're taken at focal lengths, which is quite representative of our own field of view. So I think the result of that is that a lot of the scenes are, if you were stood there, that's what you'd see.
Yeah.
So as I'm standing there, I'm looking at it and think, well, I want to walk further. I want to see what's beyond that tree. I want to follow that source of light, and I want to learn a little bit more. So I guess, hopefully in that effort to do that, people do want to look at the image and want to step into it. And that's the kind of a lot of feedback that we've had at the exhibition as well. People have said, I just want to reach out and touch it, or I just want to step in. And if that's the case, then that's a big win for me, because if it's encouraging people to want to explore, to want to step into the woods, then brilliant, because that's always something that I've wanted to translate in the image.
I wonder if a lot of people have got a fear of the woods, like, we read about the Victorians or having a fear of the mountains and the woods, and historically they were.
Yeah. A lot of people find it claustrophobic, don't they?
Yeah.
And quite menacing, and
you're encapsulating
like
a good experience in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, I've been in the woods when it's almost entirely dark. Not something that I do very often, but in some ways, I used to be an adrenaline junkie on a mountain bike. So if I get nervous in the woods, I guess in a sort of slightly strange way, I get a bit of a kick out of that as well. So, but I mean, it's interesting because no matter what the experience of the woods, whether it is more spooky or whether it is vibrant with spring colour, my interpretation is always a positive one. I don't think that used to be the case. I think in the past, it was my interpretations did have more of a kind of somber feel to it, because I was photographing, decaying trees as more of a reflection of how I was feeling at the time. Whereas now I see decay as a positive thing. It's just part of the natural life cycle of the woods. So it doesn't matter what the characteristics of the trees in the woods, I always feel as if it's a positive interpretation for me now.
Well, I think the fireworks are starting to go off, and closing on.
Yeah, I think I just heard the grand finale from our neighbour's display. Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting
Well, thank you very
noisy.
much. I really appreciated it, Simon. And I'll
No,
repeat
thank you
this.
for asking me.
The exhibition is going to be on, like you say, until March. I think it's only for a little bit of time in March. Is that right? Or late February?
Yeah, last 2 weeks of Feb and all of March.
Brilliant. So hopefully we'll get to see it. Thank you
Yes,
very much.
and Joe and I are going to be there together on the 6th, Saturday the 6th of December. We'll be there, so if people wanted to come and say hello,
That's great.
perhaps if this is going out before then, I don't know.
I'll try and make sure it goes out before then. I think we can do that.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Bye for now.
Thank you.